Have you ever felt like the more love you gave, the more invisible you became? Like every message you sent, every compliment you offered, every time you showed up first, only seemed to push her further away? It's a quiet kind of heartbreak. The kind that doesn't come from betrayal, but from the realization that your openness, your giving nature, your desire to be present, has somehow become your undoing. And you're left wondering, how could something so genuine, so honest, be so unreciprocated? But here's the truth, one that Marcus Aurelius knew centuries ago, and that far too many men still haven't learned today. What you give too easily is often valued too little. Now let me be clear, this video isn't about manipulation. It's not about cold strategies or emotional games. This is about reclaiming your center, about understanding the quiet power of restraint, and why sometimes giving less doesn't mean caring less. It means knowing your worth. In a world that tells men to always pursue, always prove, always perform, I want to offer you something radically different, a path grounded in self-mastery, in inner peace, in the kind of presence that doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. Because when you give less, not out of spite, but out of strength, something shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop over-explaining your value. You stop trying to convince anyone of your worth. And in that stillness, you become magnetic. This is the Stoic path, a way of being where you are no longer ruled by reaction, but guided by clarity, where your love is not a currency of desperation, but a gift of intention. Today, we're going to unravel that. We'll explore how emotional detachment doesn't make you distant, it makes you powerful. Why mystery creates desire. Why silence speaks louder than persuasion. And how, by giving less of yourself, you allow her the space to lean in, to wonder, to miss you. If you've ever felt overlooked, exhausted, or lost in the noise of modern dating, this video was made for you. And if these words already speak to a part of you you've long ignored, then I invite you to stay, to reflect, to grow. And if this message resonates, share it. Subscribe to Stoic Now and become part of a community that chooses depth over performance, presence over pressure. Because this isn't just dating advice. This is about becoming a man who gives from fullness, not fear. So take a breath, let go of the need to do more, and walk with me into the calm, magnetic strength of giving less. Let's begin. Number 1, the Stoic principle of detachment. There's a subtle shift that happens when a man stops needing and starts choosing. When he walks into a room not to be seen, but to observe. When he speaks not to impress, but because he has something worth saying. That shift is called detachment, and it is one of the most magnetic forces on earth. But let's clear something up. Detachment is not coldness. It is not apathy. It's not shutting down or pretending you don't care. No, that's cowardice wrapped in armor. Detachment, in its purest Stoic form, is power. The kind of power that comes from inner stillness. From knowing that your peace is not up for negotiation. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life." And he wasn't talking about fleeing the world. He meant freedom from needing the world to complete you, to validate you, to save you. Because here's the irony most men never see. When you place your happiness in someone else's hands, you don't become lovable, you become dependent. And dependency breeds resentment, both in you and in her. Think of the last time you chased too hard. When your heart was in the right place, but your spirit wasn't. When you thought, if I just show how loyal, how consistent, how attentive I am, she'll see it. She'll choose me. But she didn't. And you were left confused, maybe even bitter, wondering how your kindness became a burden. Here's why. Because giving without boundaries isn't noble, it's chaotic. And nothing sacred ever grows in chaos. The Stoics understood that true love, like true virtue, cannot be compelled. It must arise from choice, not need. From alignment, not effort. And that begins with you, learning to stand still in a world that wants you to chase. When you detach, you don't lose love. You refine it. You remove the layers of desperation, of insecurity, of performative romance. And what's left is something pure, quiet, resilient. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care from a place that isn't hollow. You give because you have something real to offer, not because you're terrified of being alone. I want you to picture a man sitting at the edge of the ocean. He watches the waves, not with expectation, but with peace. He knows the tide comes in and out, that the sea is not his to control. And yet, he feels no lack. Because the moment itself is enough. That is detachment. It's when you can love her and not cling. Desire her, but not beg. Offer your heart without offering your identity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. Only what you do. That's the ground you must stand on." You see, in the modern dating world, we're told to give everything up front. Text back instantly. Compliment constantly. Make sure she never wonders. And yet, that's precisely what kills the mystery. That's what turns intimacy into obligation. But the Stoic knows, mystery is not manipulation. It is space. And space is sacred. When you detach from outcome, you stop trying to control how she feels, and you start controlling how you live. And that is where your attraction begins to awaken. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are finally standing in your truth. There's a strength in the man who knows how to walk away. Not in anger, not in ego, but in peace. I once met a man, let's call him Elias. Smart, grounded, humble. For years, he struggled with relationships, always giving too much, always shrinking himself to fit the mold of what he thought a good man should be. He wore his heart on his sleeve, but that sleeve was often torn to shreds. One day, after another one-sided love story ended, he stopped. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. He began reading Epictetus, journaling, meditating, rebuilding the relationship he had with himself. And slowly, something shifted. He no longer feared silence. He didn't rush to prove his worth. And strangely enough, the same women who once dismissed him started noticing him differently. It wasn't his appearance that changed, it was his energy. He gave less, but with more depth. He spoke less, but with more weight. And when he looked at someone, he wasn't seeking something. He was simply witnessing. That's the energy of detachment. It's not just attractive, it's irresistible. Because it signals to the world, I am full. I am whole. I am not here to beg. I am here to build. And the women who are ready for depth will meet you there. So if you've been pouring yourself out to the point of depletion, I offer you this. Pause. Don't retreat out of anger. Don't go cold. But begin, today, to reclaim the energy you've given away so freely. Withdraw not to punish, but to realign. To see clearly. To choose from strength, not scarcity. Because when you do, you'll start to attract not just attention, but presence. And she will feel it. Not because you tried to be noticed, but because you stopped trying altogether. Epictetus reminded us, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. So want less and receive more. That is the essence of Stoic detachment. That is the beginning of love that does not devour, but expands. And when you begin from that place, everything changes. Number 2, the power of mystery. There's a moment, right before a candle flickers out, when the flame glows brightest. That moment of tension, of anticipation, it draws you in. Not because it's loud, but because it's uncertain. And in that uncertainty, something ancient stirs. That's the power of mystery. In relationships, most men fear being misunderstood, so they explain everything. They text too much, share too soon, confess before the connection has even had a chance to breathe. And in doing so, they collapse the very space that desire needs to grow. You see, desire doesn't live in knowing. It lives in wondering. It lives in the pause between your message and hers. In the unanswered glance. In the moment you choose to say nothing, and she begins to question why. But most men panic in the silence. They think, if I don't say something now, I'll lose her. If I don't prove I care, she'll forget me. And so they smother her with reassurance, with presence, with the constant reminder that they're right there, available, eager, waiting. But what they don't see is this. Every time you fill the silence, you remove the mystery. And without mystery, there can be no magnetism. I had a friend, let's call him Jordan. He was the kind of guy every woman says she wants. Thoughtful, honest, emotionally available. He met a woman who seemed different, sharp, soulful, the kind of presence that makes you forget the world for a moment. From the start, he gave her everything. Texted her good morning and good night. Took her to dinners, remembered every detail of her stories, sent flowers when she had a bad day. In his heart, he thought, if I show her how much I care, she'll feel safe enough to stay. And for a while, it worked. Until one day, she just faded. No fight, no drama, just silence. And Jordan was shattered. Not because she rejected him, but because he gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. But here's what I told him, something most men never hear. It wasn't that he cared too much. It's that he gave too much too soon, before she had the chance to invest, to wonder, to miss him. Because attraction, at its core, is a dance between presence and absence, between showing up and stepping back. And that balance is what creates intrigue. It's what keeps her thinking about you when you're not in the room. It's what makes her lean in instead of pull away. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." In dating, the modern version might be, if you're speaking just to fill the space, say nothing. If you're acting out of fear, wait. Let the silence speak. The Stoics weren't emotionally detached. They were emotionally disciplined. They understood that the most powerful presence is often the quietest. That mystery doesn't mean hiding who you are. It means not giving it all away at once. Think of a well-written novel. The first chapter doesn't reveal everything. It plants seeds. It hints. It leaves space for the reader to imagine, to lean forward, to want more. You don't fall in love with the story because it tells you everything. You fall in love because it doesn't. So too with you. You don't need to tell her every thought the moment you have it. You don't need to reply instantly to every message. You don't need to constantly reassure her of how much she means to you. What you need is presence, stillness, the kind of internal gravity that makes your silence louder than someone else's noise. Because when you speak only when it matters, she listens. When you appear without warning, she remembers. And when you vanish for a time, not out of spite, but out of rhythm, she notices. This is not a tactic. It's not about making her chase. It's about restoring the natural balance of energy. So much of modern romance is built on instant gratification. Swipe right, text back, jump in, share everything. And yet, what people crave, what truly draws them in, is the one thing our world has forgotten, the unknown. We want to discover someone, not be handed their blueprint. And when you learn to live with just a little less availability, just a little more restraint, you allow her to experience what most men never give her, the luxury of curiosity. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The same is true of our energy. Don't waste it proving your worth. Don't rush to explain your every mood, your every choice. Let her sit with the questions. Let her earn the answers. Because when she begins to wonder, where is he? What is he thinking? Why do I miss him when he's quiet? That is when you are no longer just another option. You become a presence, a pull, a mystery, and that is unforgettable. So the next time you feel that urge to over-explain, to reach out again, to chase, pause, take a breath, and remember, mystery is not distance. It is depth. It is the sacred space between two souls that allows love not just to ignite, but to burn slowly, beautifully, and true. Number 3, attention as a reward, not a default. Most people never pause to ask, what is my attention truly worth? We move through our days tossing glances, texts, affirmations, treating our presence like loose change in a crowded marketplace. But when something is given freely and constantly, it begins to lose its shape, its color, its power. In love, especially, we tend to believe that more presence equals more connection. That being constantly available will make someone feel more secure, more desired, more inclined to stay. But it doesn't. It often does the opposite. Because anything offered endlessly becomes ordinary. The man who floods a woman with messages, praise, availability, he thinks he's proving his devotion. But what he's actually doing is removing all mystery, all weight from his presence. His attention becomes ambient, background noise, easy to take for granted. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That same principle should guide how you give your energy. If it's not aligned with who you are, don't offer it. And if it's not earned, don't extend it out of habit. The Stoics believed in giving from intention, not impulse. Attention, when grounded in self-respect, becomes something else entirely. It transforms into presence. Not just being around, but being remembered, felt. Too many men give because they're afraid. Afraid of losing her, of being forgotten, of falling behind some imaginary competition. But fear-giving is never respected. It's sensed, and it creates imbalance from the start. Instead of pouring your attention out like a leaking faucet, Think of it like a sacred fire. Don't hand out sparks to anyone standing nearby. Let the flame burn with purpose. Let others feel the heat from a distance before they earn the warmth up close. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. But the Stoics knew it without charts or data. They understood that humans don't just crave connection. We crave meaning. And meaning is born from contrast. Constant attention dulls the senses. Intentional attention sharpens them. Picture this. A woman receives 5 messages before noon from different men. Good morning, beautiful. Hope you have a great day. Thinking about you. The same recycled lines, repeated like routine. Then, nothing from you. Not out of gamesmanship, but because your energy is deliberate. Later, when you speak, it's not fluff, it's insight. Not filler, but presence. She leans in. Not because you asked her to, because you didn't have to. That's the difference. Seneca once wrote, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." In love, we suffer more when we try to prevent loss by overgiving. We try to guard ourselves with presence. But in doing so, we give away our worth too soon. Your attention should never be constant. It should be calibrated, based on resonance, response, reciprocity. And when you give it, not because you're bored or anxious, but because it reflects truth, it lands differently. It becomes a reward, not a reflex. This isn't manipulation. It's maturity. I knew a man named Theo. Kind-hearted, sincere, deeply available. Too available. He gave his attention like oxygen. Women liked him, but didn't desire him. Until he learned restraint. Not withdrawal. Not cruelty. Just calm, conscious presence. He began to respond instead of chase. He stopped explaining his every move. And soon, something changed. The same women who once treated him like a safe option began to look at him differently. Not because he became colder, but because he became more valuable. He no longer filled silences out of fear. He let them breathe. He no longer offered compliments to gain favor. He offered clarity when it mattered. And he no longer gave attention like a child with a water hose. He gave it like a man with a match. And suddenly, they felt the difference. When your attention is intentional, your absence becomes powerful. It leaves space for longing, for reflection, for curiosity. You're not avoiding her. You're inviting her to meet you in presence, not pattern. When you pull back, not in anger, but in strength, you offer her the rarest thing, the opportunity to choose you without pressure. That's when connection becomes real. Attention isn't about quantity. It's about quality. Frequency doesn't build value, meaning does. And meaning is born when your energy is rooted in dignity, not desperation. So take stock of your habits. Reflect. Ask yourself, am I giving because she earned this moment, or because I'm afraid of silence? Let that question be your compass. Because when you give less, but give it with weight, clarity, and calm, you stop being background noise. You become a force she feels, even in your stillness. That's not a trick. That's a truth. And the man who learns it early never begs to be seen again. Number 4, silence as strength. Not every voice is heard through words. Some are felt in the quiet, in the space between one message and the next, in the pause that lingers after a shared glance. Silence, when owned, not feared, is a language of its own. In today's world, silence is often mistaken for weakness. If you don't respond fast enough, you're seen as uninterested. If you don't speak up, you're considered passive. But the Stoics understood a deeper truth. Silence isn't the absence of presence. It is the mark of depth. A man who can hold his silence without needing to fill it holds power. In relationships, especially, we are taught to react. She texts, you reply. She's distant, you lean in harder. But that cycle often becomes a trap. One that keeps your worth tethered to her reaction, your peace tied to her proximity. And so, silence becomes terrifying. It feels like rejection, disconnection, abandonment. But only when you haven't mastered it. The Stoic mind views silence not as emptiness, but as fullness held inward. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands, unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." Let that be your silence. Not cold, but grounded. Not empty, but still. When you stop reacting to every emotional ripple, you become the steady presence that others learn to trust and miss. Picture this. A woman checks her phone after sending a text. She expects the usual pattern. an immediate response, a flood of attention. But instead, nothing. A pause, an unknown. And in that moment, curiosity ignites. Reflection begins. Not because you're playing games, but because your silence has meaning. Most men rush to explain, to reassure, to close the gap. They believe affection must be loud, visible, constant. But love rooted in noise rarely lasts. Because noise doesn't reveal strength, restraint does. Silence is not absence. It is a mirror. It reflects what she cannot see in your presence. Your quietness forces her to listen not just to you, but to herself. And that's where the real connection begins. You see, a man who can sit in silence is not a man who lacks words. He's a man who chooses them. A man who doesn't just fill space to feel heard, but waits until he has something worth offering. This is the paradox. When you become comfortable with silence, you become unforgettable. The world is full of noise. DMs, reels, endless words. But stillness? That's rare. I once knew a man named Cole. Artist, introvert, quiet by nature, but not because he lacked confidence. He simply never rushed to speak, never chased attention, never tried to fill the space. When he was with a woman, he didn't compete for her validation. He simply was. And she noticed. When he didn't reply right away, she leaned in. When he didn't speak often, she listened more closely. When he showed up, it felt like presence, not performance. That's the energy of a man rooted in stillness. A man who doesn't fear silence uses it. As a tool, as a boundary, as a statement. Seneca once wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance." And wisdom often begins in listening, in restraint, in choosing the right moment, not just the loudest one. If you find yourself constantly explaining, apologizing, reaching, step back. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of if I say nothing? If the answer is, I'll lose her, then your silence is not the problem, your attachment is. Real love doesn't fear silence. It respects it. A woman who values your energy will not vanish when you're quiet. She will lean into it. She will notice it. Because the absence of your words will highlight the presence of your spirit. But for that to happen, you must trust yourself enough to be still. Still in uncertainty. Still in desire. Still in the space between expression and outcome. That is the silence the Stoics held sacred. When Epictetus taught his students, he didn't lecture constantly. He asked questions. He waited. He let the silence do half the teaching. Because he understood that transformation doesn't happen in noise. It happens in the pause that lets wisdom echo. So give her that echo. Let your quiet speak louder than their noise. Let your stillness be the contrast that makes your presence unforgettable. Because silence, when chosen, not as a weapon, but as wisdom, is the highest form of confidence. Not I don't care, but I care enough to not beg. And that energy, that calm, immovable strength, it stays with her, long after the words fade. Number 5, let her invest too. Connection without balance is a fire that consumes rather than warms. It burns out fast. It leaves behind ashes where there should have been roots. And so many men today, good men, soulful men, give too much, too soon, without asking the question that Stoicism whispers softly. Is she investing too? Love, to be real, must be reciprocal. In the rush to prove themselves, many men forget the quiet power of allowing space for the other person to give, to reach out, to initiate, to show effort not because they're being chased, but because they choose to invest. When you carry the entire emotional weight of a relationship, when you're always the first to text, the one to plan, the one who adapts, explains, gives, and stays, you may think you're building something. But in reality, you're standing alone, trying to create intimacy on your own shoulders. That's not love. That's labor. And the Stoics knew, love must be built on equity, not imbalance. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." A man who craves constant reassurance, validation, connection, without receiving effort in return, is not giving from abundance. He's giving from fear. Fear of loss. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough. But what if you stopped giving everything up front? Not as punishment, but as protection. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. What if you let her lean in? Let her text first sometimes. Let her plan the date. Let her wonder about you. Reach for you. Offer part of her own presence instead of only receiving yours. Imagine two fires. One burns wild, uncontrolled, feeding everything around it. The other is tended, shared, balanced. One eventually dies from exhaustion. The other sustains. Let her be part of tending the flame. I remember a man named Aiden, deeply thoughtful, incredibly loyal. He fell hard every time he liked someone, texted constantly, paid for every outing, complimented her like it was oxygen. She didn't dislike him, but she never fully leaned in either. Until one day, Aiden pulled back, not because he was angry, but because he realized he was giving more than he was receiving. He started to listen, not to her words, but to her effort. He gave when it felt aligned, not when he was anxious. He allowed himself to receive, and everything changed. When he gave her room to invest, she began to see the space he held, not as absence, but as invitation. She stepped forward. She started texting first, suggesting plans, asking deeper questions, because now it was mutual. Now it was shared. The Stoic doesn't beg to be chosen. He makes room for those who choose him. So often, we associate masculinity with control, taking charge, doing more, leading the interaction. But real strength is knowing when to pause, when to let her step forward, when to give her the dignity of effort. And effort is where desire lives. When someone gives to you, no matter how small, they begin to value you more. It's human nature. What we work for, we respect. What we receive without effort, we forget. So the next time you feel the urge to overgive, to plan 3 steps ahead, to fix, to carry it all, stop. Ask, has she shown effort? Not just interest. Effort. Interest is cheap. Effort is rare. Does she make time? Does she initiate? Does she remember what matters to you, just as you do for her? If not, it's time to rebalance. Let her feel the space, not to manipulate, but to awaken her agency in the relationship. Because love is not given. It is co-created. Epictetus taught. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. In love, say to yourself, I will be a man who gives from wholeness, not need. And then do what that man would do. Stand still, stand clear, and welcome only what is mutual. This is not about withholding affection. It's about not flooding someone who hasn't yet shown they can swim beside you. You are not a rescue raft. You are a man on solid ground. And when you live that way, calm, rooted, receptive, but not desperate, you allow women to step into their own strength, their own giving, their own desire. And when she does give, you'll feel the difference. It won't be obligation. It will be choice. And choice, when freely given, is the birthplace of intimacy. So let her invest. Let her light the match sometimes. Let her carry the wood. Let her feed the flame. And in doing so, you'll no longer wonder if she's truly there. Because she'll be standing next to you, not just warmed by your fire, but building it with you. Number 6, give with intention, not addiction. Oh, give is beautiful, but to give blindly is a slow erosion of the self. In relationships, the line between love and self-abandonment often hides behind noble words. I just care too much. I'm only trying to make her happy. That's just who I am, I give. But underneath those words often lies something more fragile, more urgent, a hunger to be needed, a need to be accepted, a fear of being forgotten. The Stoics taught that even virtue, if untethered from clarity, becomes chaos. Epictetus reminded us, when you want something, you must realize that you're not the only one who wants it. In other words, wanting to be loved is not enough. It must be offered in a way that does not diminish you. Ask yourself, why am I giving? That's the question that separates wisdom from compulsion. The anxious man gives not from abundance, but from addiction. His giving is not a gift, it's a negotiation, a silent plea. If I do enough, she'll stay. If I give her this, she'll choose me. If I show her how much I care, she won't leave. But this kind of giving doesn't lead to intimacy. It leads to exhaustion, resentment, quiet bitterness. Because deep down, he knows he's not giving. He's bargaining. The Stoic path urges you to pause before you offer your time, your words, your heart. Not to harden it, but to honor it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And if your giving is soaked in fear, your love will feel heavy, conditional, clingy. But when you give from calm, from fullness, from alignment, your love becomes light. Not weightless, but liberating. So how do you know the difference? Ask yourself 3 questions before you give anything of value. 1. Is this coming from fear or calm? If the act of giving is driven by a fear of losing her, pause. If it flows from a place of peace, proceed. 2. Will this bring value or just relief? Are you giving something that nourishes both of you, or are you offering it just to quiet your own anxiety? 3. Would I still offer this if nothing came back? True giving is free of expectation. If your gift depends on her reaction, it's not love, it's a transaction. Let's take a simple example. Imagine you're planning a thoughtful date. You buy her favorite wine, pick a place she loves, dress in a way that shows care. If you're doing it because you genuinely want to create a beautiful shared moment, yes, that's stoic generosity. That's aligned action. But if you're doing it hoping she'll finally see your worth, finally choose you, finally stop being distant, that's addiction disguised as romance. The act may look the same on the outside, but the energy behind it writes an entirely different story. The truth is, women feel this energy deeply. They may not always articulate it, but they sense when your giving comes from fear. And no one wants to feel responsible for someone else's self-worth. That's not attraction. That's pressure. And pressure suffocates desire. Real love, the kind that breathes and grows, requires 2 people who give freely, not out of compulsion, but out of clarity, who understand that boundaries are not barriers. They are invitations to give better. I once worked with a man named Jonah. Brilliant, soulful, endlessly generous. He'd bend himself backward for every woman he dated, paid for everything, wrote long messages, changed his plans, his preferences, his priorities, just to make them feel adored. And still, he was left. One day, he asked, "Why do they always leave when I give them everything?" The answer wasn't easy to hear, but it was necessary. Because you never asked whether they wanted everything. He gave out of fear, out of urgency, out of the belief that if he stopped pouring, the love would dry up. But when he learned to give with intention, not reaction, everything changed. He began to give slower. He waited to see effort. He let conversations breathe. He shared not just affection, but standards. And soon, the women he attracted didn't just stay, they leaned in. Because his love felt earned, not expected. You are not here to perform worthiness. You are here to offer truth. You are not here to be chosen for your efforts. You are here to be met in your presence. When your giving becomes thoughtful, when it arises from the strength of knowing you could give more, but you choose to give what's aligned, you create an entirely new dynamic. One built not on addiction, but admiration. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And it takes bravery to pause, to resist the urge to fix, to let your silence speak instead of over-explaining, to allow someone to meet you where you are, rather than dragging yourself to where you think they'll stay. So before you give again, ask, is this love or is this a plea? When your giving becomes a reflection of your soul, not a performance for someone else's comfort, you become magnetic. Not because you gave more, but because you finally gave right. You've heard every rule in dating. Be confident, be charming, be consistent. But the rarest lesson, the one whispered quietly by the Stoics and ignored by the noisy world, is this: give less with more soul. That doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening it carefully, protecting its flame, giving not to be loved, but to live in truth. Because when you stop pouring yourself out for those who haven't earned even a drop, something profound begins to happen. You start attracting those who see your worth without needing it performed. Those who feel your presence even when you're silent. Those who respect your boundaries, not resent them. When you give less, you offer the most valuable thing of all: space. Space for her to wonder, to miss you, to reflect on what your energy truly brought into her life. And in that space, your depth becomes unforgettable. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are scattered, anxious, addicted to her validation, your soul will feel like smoke, not fire. But when your thoughts are calm, rooted in self-trust, disciplined in emotion, your soul becomes the color of clarity. And that clarity becomes your presence. Let go of the idea that more giving equals more love. Love isn't built in the giving. It's built in the understanding behind it. The courage to say, "I care, but I don't chase." The grace to offer affection that doesn't ask for something in return. The quiet strength to let her miss you. Because what's missed is always more valuable than what's constantly there. Let her text first sometimes. Let her feel your absence when you're focused on your life. Let her wonder what you're thinking, not because you're hiding, but because your peace no longer needs to explain itself. That's not coldness. That's invitation. You are not withdrawing to punish her. You are stepping back to protect your essence. You are not ignoring her. You are honoring yourself. And in doing so, you're teaching her something the world rarely teaches, that your presence is not a guarantee. It is a gift. So, walk through this world not as someone trying to be chosen, but as someone so grounded, so inwardly alive, that others feel your strength even in silence. Let your stillness speak. Let your restraint become poetry. Let your depth become something she remembers long after the noise fades. And if this message stirred something in you, if you felt seen, even just for a moment, then let us grow this together. Like this video if it resonated. Subscribe to Stoic Now for more paths to inner clarity and quiet strength. And tell us in the comments, where in your life are you learning to give less and love deeper? Because we are all walking this path together. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer the world is the silence that lets your soul speak.